I was wondering if I could just ask a follow-up question to piggyback on that. I'm wondering if maybe over time what we learn is that, and again, I don't know that much about how we learn, but that there are some MOOCs that are great for learning and some MOOCs that aren't. So for example, the other day I came home from being out of town. I live in Chicago, and my house was 45 degrees. I went to the furnace. I was like, oh God, the furnace isn't working. Got online, watched a 12-minute video about what could possibly be wrong, figured out that it was the igniter switch. I didn't need the Socratic method to tell me that this is what I need to do. So I'm just curious, is it possible that as this thing plays out, that what we learn is, look, there are some MOOCs that are great teachers, I'm using that in sort of the broad sense, and some that aren't. I mean, I don't know that much about how we learn, but is that possible, that some are good for learning and some are not?
Yes. I mean, to Brewer's point, I mean, the cognitive science of learning, and Brewer is probably one of the world's foremost experts, if not the foremost expert, is not well developed enough and not well enough understood. At the Gates Foundation, we have been communicating with Brewer for a number of years, actually, and this is something that there has been a tendency, to your point, to sort of drop technology everywhere and hope it improves learning. And clearly that is not the right answer. The right answer is to figure out what does work in learning, and there's promising things like adaptive learning. A number of programs like Carnegie Mellon OLI does a very good job of teaching statistics because it actually measures what you know and it scaffolds your learning, and it basically uses individualized instruction based on the objectives you've mastered and the objectives you haven't. There's also another project out of Carnegie Learning that is in fact called Carnegie Learning that is math-based, that has been very successful in the earlier grades math. But I think we confuse things a little bit when we talk about maybe are there good MOOCs or bad MOOCs. MOOCs are in version 2.0 of this new medium of delivering online courses, and are just now putting in better and better interactives and leveraging the cognitive science, and it's still early days. You can very much see that in the year 2025, the year 2035, online learning is going to be pretty damn powerful, and we're just in the first inning.
I think I want to answer that question by also responding to a point that Anant made that I think is really insightful. So Anant said that he's been at MIT for a while and he hasn't had any training, I guess, on education, right? And I think what's important there is this idea that that problem could be solved if we provide training to our faculty members and to our teachers about how teaching works and how to improve our teaching, right? We don't need a particular technology for that, right? There we have identified a problem, we've identified a solution, preparing faculty members who are generally hired for the great research that they do to teach better, right? So in the case of MOOCs, for your question, I think we can identify specific purposes, right? What are we trying to achieve with them? Are we trying to introduce students to STEM fields and get underrepresented populations excited about them? Are we trying to achieve the same outcomes that an intro to educational psychology course is aiming to provide? So I think once we define specific outcomes, then we can design for those and evaluate those.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit more, and I'll use the example that Stephanie brought up, because there's a really key point there, which is, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And I'll use the example Stephanie brought up in terms of fixing looking at a furnace problem. So Stephanie
I fixed it, by the way.
Awesome. So Stephanie looked at a video and figured out how to solve the problem, and she solved the problem. Now suppose you have to go and do the same thing. So we asked Stephanie to do it again 5 years later. The question is, what is learning? Learning has to do with long-term understanding and retrieval of information. And there's a field of learning. And by the way, all of this stuff that I'm spouting is I've learned in the past year or two, called retrieval learning. But the idea is if you show somebody something, they'll learn very quickly and they'll be able to apply it right then. But you ask them 5 years later to repair my furnace, you won't be able to do it. However, if you do it with retrieval learning, if you show somebody a concept with decreasing frequency, but repeated decreasing frequency. So we show the video of repairing a furnace to somebody a month later, and then 6 months later, and then 2 years later. It is well known through the retrieval learning theory that they will remember it for life. They will have learned it forever. So I think we need to also look at the goals that you're trying to accomplish. You do something very quickly or really learn it for life.